In this short video, what I want to do is show you how to use the statistical functions in Excel when you have data entered into it, and then how to graph data that you've entered in Excel. So let's look at the statistical functions first. I'm going to go up here, your menu. This is Microsoft Excel through Excel Online from Office 365. So it may look a little different on your computers. You want to get to the home page where we have a series of menu options for you. Let's go back to where I was when I started here, which was Insert. And this is where we're going to stay because there's several different things I can do on this page. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight an empty cell. Let's say I wanted to calculate various stats about this particular column. Let's say I wanted to calculate the mean or the average, or maybe I want to do median. I'm going to click on Insert Function. And here, the first thing I'm going to look at is whether I've used this before. And indeed, I have used average before, because that's something I want to do quite frequently. And I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. It places the average formula in the cell, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to highlight the numbers that I want it to average. Now if I clicked enter here, it would get mad at me. I have to close the parentheses, and then I can click enter. And this 10.5 reflects the average of that column of data. Let's say I wanted to do median. I'll click on function. Now, I don't see it necessarily on this list, but that's okay. I can select from the drop-down menu, statistical functions, and then from this rather long list, I can find median. Now, before I go on, it's really important that you have a cell that's empty, that's highlighted, otherwise you're going to end up with some very strange circular sorts of equations. So make sure that your cursor is always over an open cell before you start any of this. I'm going to click on OK. I'm going to highlight the numbers that I'm curious about. I'm going to close the parentheses so the computer doesn't freak out. Now what's interesting here is that the median is the same as the average, and that is something we see in certain types of data distributions. So it's not that the computer did something wrong. It just happens to be how this data is organized. Let's try doing variance. Now, for variance, as I'm going to talk about in class as well, I have several different options. I'm going to go back to statistical. Because I have such a small group of data, I'm going to click on var.s, variance of the sample. And I'm going to click OK. I'm going to highlight the data, close the parentheses, and it calculates variance. Let's say I want standard deviation. Same thing. I have a lot of choices here, but we are going to use, just for our purposes today, standard deviation of the sample. I'm going to say OK. I'm going to highlight my data. And in 4 relatively quick clicks, we've calculated average, median, variance, and standard deviation. If I want to calculate it here, I can go through the same set of steps again. Or I can be lazy, and I can highlight these 4. I can copy them, and then I can paste them here. And I didn't notice I didn't paste the number, I pasted the equation. So now it has calculated it for this row. Kind of a fast way of doing things. Okay, let's now look at what I'd want to do if I wanted to graph the data. Now remember, the data is here. In fact, I'm going to highlight it. And this is the first step to graphing data, is we want to define what is the data we're graphing. And note, I included the titles. Really important here, because as we'll see, this is what's going to define axes for us. When I do lines, there's a choice to make. I can either pick the line graph or I can pick the scatter graph. I almost always choose the scatter graph for what we do because it's just a little bit easier to manipulate the program. So I'm going to select scatter graph, and I'm going to select the version that has straight lines and markers. Okay, and it actually graphed the data for me. Now let's look at what is on the X and Y axis. What is on the x-axis, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, corresponds to our first column. So let me say that again. The first column is the x-axis. Then the program even coded for us which one was run 1 and which one was run 2. Run 1, shown here in blue, 3, 6. Again, what am I reading the 3 and 6 on? It's the y-axis. So run 1, run 2, what I'm measuring, my dependent variable, goes appropriately on the y-axis. My independent variable, which is a little strange, it's actually just sample number, is on the x-axis. Now, note the steps that I had to do. I had to highlight all my data, including the title. I had to go to scatter graph. I'm not going to do it again, otherwise it's going to paste something on top of it. And then I had to click on the appropriate graph type. Now, let's say that I'd like to label my graph. This is probably easier done in the full version of Excel. We're going to see if I can do it here. And I may need to show you this in class on the full version. But this is the basics right here. And if I wanted to copy or cut it out and paste it into a Word document, I could just simply highlight it and copy and paste using the commands at your keyboard.